Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live broadcast of the history of fresh produce. We are here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm so excited to be here. Patrick is here, John is here, the crew is all together. Instead of one of my wonderful intros like I usually do, I have a little challenge for Patrick and John today. So we're excited that you guys are here, and let's bring them on.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the history of fresh produce. We're live, in person, online. Thanks to Maddie for the introduction. And we have a task at hand now before we even get started, which kind of has me a little afraid.
I was just trying to get into the room at the right time. There is no green room.
If you were here in person, you would have seen the chaos.
It was fun. Maddie, as always, great opening.
Yes. Should we do the experiment?
What do you think?
Well, I think we have to.
All right. Well, I got a bottle opener too, which was, hard to find.
It's for you now.
All right. He didn't want to open my bottle. That's fine. For all you people that hate that, hate that. So Maddie said, if you drink Coca-Cola and banana, or not drink
I think
banana,
you have to eat the banana first,
eat the
drink.
But I'm saying together, it tastes like dirt.
Yeah, which I'm really enthusiastic about.
I thought dirt tasted like dirt.
We're gonna do it at the same time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so how long do you got to chew it for?
I think you have to mix it.
Oh, it's a mix. Mm-hmm. It's a mixed drink.
And it looks okay.
What the?
Oh yeah.
Mine just mine exploded.
Yeah, I would not recommend that mix.
I wouldn't either.
No.
I think there's a chemical reaction.
Well, thank you, Maddie, for that.
Oh my gosh.
That treat.
Listen, little produce and a little Coca-Cola.
Well, you're in Atlanta.
And we've been talking about this, you and I behind the scenes for the last month or so.
Yeah.
About what we're going to talk about on the history of fresh produce.
Yes.
For our first session live together.
And we wanted to make it appropriate, right?
Yeah.
We're here for the International Fresh Produce
It's true.
Association Global Produce and Floral Show, right?
Yep.
And we have to thank, of course, our sponsors who are the IFPA.
Yeah. No, we appreciate that.
Beautiful venue that
this
we're
is
at,
cool.
the Reverb Hotel in Atlanta.
If you could see the Reverb Radio by Hard Rock sign, I mean, if that's not a radio sign, I don't know what it is.
So again, we're in Atlanta. So what is more iconic in Atlanta than Coca-Cola?
Yeah, right? There's
but
a lot.
But what most people don't realize is how much produce played a role in Coca-Cola.
Well, if people have been following the show, the history of fresh produce, there's been a lot of iconic names that are a part of history that have to do with the fresh produce, but they're always in something else before they're even in that part.
Yeah.
I would say that, in industry, it's like, I mean, if you listen to the Flagler episodes, we've got a lot of good feedback on that Flagler episode. And I even got a comment that said, I recommended he did this. You might know that who that is.
Oh yeah.
But
I know.
It's funny because a lot of these, they're entrepreneurs, right? They're kind of like philanthropists. They see visions, and produce is a part of history. Again, food is, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, being here in Atlanta, you wouldn't think produce in Atlanta.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, obviously, we all know about the Georgia peach, right? But that would have been a little too obvious. So we figured, let's go with Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and we got the glass bottles as well,
because we want all of our history of fresh produce listeners to, when they see Coca-Cola this week for the show, that they're not going to just think of the fizzy beverage, but of produce.
No, they're going to think me spilling
and that too,
banana and.
Well, let's get into the background of Coca-Cola.
Okay,
where this drink is even coming from, because it has kind of a bizarre history. Now, the top attraction in Atlanta, which you did visit, is the Museum of Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I did.
Which is just down the street here.
It was fun.
So if you want to learn more Coca-Cola specific history after this, you can stop by that.
It was good.
Museum.
I'll tell you, it was fun, and we did the self-guided tour. But you realize, like, Coca-Cola is such an iconic name.
Yeah,
it's such a brand, right? And this is what I'm going to tell you. I enjoyed looking at a lot of like the memorabilia. They've got a lot of like their own memorabilia, but something like the machines, the coolers, like the stuff that you see, like if you go over to like a friend's house and you're like, whoa, and you're like, oh man, I had this cooler for 30 years. I got it restored. And I mean, those are the types of things when you see Coca-Cola, like that's what kind of brings it back. And they played this commercial too that I swear, if you were if you were younger, you're like, what is this? You get older and you're like, man,
nostalgia.
Coca-Cola, I love. It reminds me of my childhood. It's like smelling a candle, like it brings you back.
Let's see how back this trip beverage goes, right?
Oh, it
starts with a unique individual.
It does.
Starts with a John Pemberton.
Okay.
Who was born in 1831.
All right.
In Georgia, not in Atlanta, but in another town called Knoxville, Georgia.
All right.
And he goes to school for medicine, which is, not uncommon, I would say, during that time. He goes to the Reformed Medical College of Georgia in 1850, graduates at 19, which is not unusual for that time. That's just graduation age. Don't think he's any much smarter than the average person. No. He becomes licensed to practice Thomsonian principles, which is basically botanical science, botanical medicine,
like holistic healing today.
Basically, herbal medicine,
right?
Cleansing the body of your toxins, that whole thing. And so, I think people like that are relatively respected today, right? I mean, they have a little bit of a perception, I guess.
I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot. It's called a little bit differently now, right? Like I said, holistic. That's how you eat. It's a little. I'd say 100% from back then till today. It's
back then when he was,
you were like a voodoo.
Yeah, you were kind of like, this guy seems a little phony.
Yeah, why are we doing? He doesn't want us to take morphine.
Yeah,
what is going on here?
Exactly,
because that plays a part in this too.
Yes, there is a lot of morphine in this story.
Listen, to be honestly, we do mention a few different class schedule 1 drugs.
Yeah, there's a lot of drugs in this one, but you know what? It's all plant based.
But it's all plant based.
And it doesn't have to be treated like abusively.
But Coca-Cola, when people think of Coca-Cola, they think about those original recipes,
right?
And what used to be in it. So, but like I said, I like that we went back to the history of it because I don't think most people understood this. Went all the way back to the 1800s.
Yep.
And then, like I said, Pemberton. This guy was born in 1831.
Yeah.
Right. The guy that
it's
developed
war.
Coke.
Yeah.
Think about it. 1831.
Yeah. And look,
Coke since 1831.
Well, he didn't make
no, I know.
But
it's not that Coke anymore.
But eventually the Civil War does hit.
True.
Right. So he's in his 30s or so, late 20s.
Oh, they still drafted.
Yeah, I don't know what the draft policy was back then, but he's in the South, so that means he's in the Confederate Army.
Oh yeah.
And he serves in the 3rd Cavalry Battalion.
Yep.
So he's riding the horses for those who might not know.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
And at the time, he achieves the rank of lieutenant colonel. So not a bad, pretty impressive Army career there for his time in the Civil War. But unfortunate for him, at the very end of the Civil War, he literally fights in the very last battle.
He finally got in
of the Civil War.
Yeah.
Okay. The Battle of Columbus, and he gets a saber to the chest.
Oh, jeez.
You don't want to get a saber pretty much anywhere, but let alone to the chest.
No one wants a saber to the chest.
No, but he somehow survives it.
Okay.
And today's painkillers, what do we got? We got like ibuprofen, Tylenol. That's right. Back then it was morphine
only. Morphine only.
Just morphine.
Yeah,
that was the go-to painkiller.
There was no like, hey, let's start with this. It was we got you.
No. So he's on the morphine, and as you can imagine, a saber to the chest is not going to just go away in a couple of weeks. That's going to be around for a while. Ouch. So he's taking a healthy dose of morphine for a while, right?
Good for him.
But he moves on from the Civil War. He's alive. He moves his operation. So at this point, he has like a pharmaceutical enterprise operation going on. And he moves that from, I believe it was in Columbus, to Atlanta, which is the city that's starting to reinvent itself after the war. It's starting to grow. Entrepreneurs are finding opportunities to build that city. And so now he is trying to figure out a way to get off of his morphine, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to stand that for too long.
Yeah.
And he's a smart enough guy that I think he realizes he doesn't want to stand that for too long.
And back then there wasn't another drug that you could switch to at the time.
No, not really.
But there was wine.
There was wine.
So, I mean, I think that's the Mariani wine, I believe it was, right?
Yes, the famous Vin Mariani.
So we'll talk about that for a moment. And I think that's, this is what I was going to say. Like, these guys knew what they were doing, right? You know, by going and switching to wine. I know he made like an off kind of brand, a mimic of that Mariani wine that was, apparently incredible. Yeah. And some of the notes that we have, right, from the French chemist Angelo Mariani, these guys began brewing a wine infused with coca leaves.
Yep.
Okay. Which later sold under the brand name Vin Mariani. Now, this drink was one of many coca wines, though.
Yeah, that was the good. That was
give you that little tingly outside your lip when you drink it, right?
Yeah. Like, coca wines, they're kind of a category.
And I know that you even mentioned that in some of the like Sherlock Holmes, detective books and those things like that, they would chew on coca leaves and
Sherlock
different
would
things.
Get injections of some cocaine,
pretty much cocaine
to stimulate his brain.
Yes,
the story of Sherlock. He's
got to be
that can kind of see things like 20 steps forward.
So the coca leaf was kind of a good thing back then. They were looking at it as wasn't a stimulant, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a bad thing. I mean, Queen Victoria loved it.
Yep.
The Pope loved it.
Yes.
Okay, so the leader of the Christian church is all about the coca wine.
Yep.
So this is not a hands-off kind of
right. It's not like it was like whoa.
No,
don't touch this stuff.
But again, this is not pure cocaine.
No, it's just the leaf.
The coca leaf has about 10% cocaine.
Yep.
Alkaloids. Yeah, so you're not getting like super high on it.
Yeah. Okay.
You feel good.
I'm just checking, making sure. Well, and that's kind of after a lot of this happening, Coca-Cola is born from a lot of the things that were happening with the wine, right? And then what Pemberton was doing with trying to get off morphine.
Yep.
And this, Coca-Cola was born. How was it born though?
Well, like you said, he does a copycat of the Vin Mariani,
of course,
which has the coca and the wine.
Yep.
But he says, I'll do something slightly different, so people can't accuse me of being completely copying. So he adds the cola nut.
Okay.
Cola nut now is unique because it has caffeine in it. So he gets that extra kick of now energy into it. So you have like kind of the coca, which adds kind of a comfort, relaxation, takes away hunger kind of thing, and then caffeine adds a little shot of energy,
a little extra.
But unfortunately for Pemberton, the temperance movement hits Atlanta. Right. And so now alcohol's off the table. And this is about 20 years after he introduces his wine. So he's been having great success. People love it. But now
no alcohol.
It's banned. So he says, I got to do something. This drink is way too popular. I'm making money off of it. So he decides to alter the recipe somewhat.
Right.
Sends a batch of this syrup to Jacob's Pharmacy, which is like the go-to pharmacy back in the day in Atlanta on the main street.
Right.
And at that pharmacy, they have these carbonated water stations, these fountain stations, which are very popular. Fountain beverages were popular, not like what we know of them as today, but they were still bubbly drinks, right? And so what happens is that syrup gets mixed with the carbonated water. And I know you told me yesterday.
So that was, was that an accident or was it not? So So according to urban legends, it was told to be an accident, but realistically, it was planned to be a carbonated drink. Now in the Coca-Cola factory, the museum, whatever, I think it's just the museum.
I think it's museum
headquarters, whatever we went to. I was 5 kids deep yesterday with it, you know what I mean? But what I would say is they literally had it in the tour where they said it was an accident. So they, unless I missed it, they said it was an urban legend. You know what I mean? Yeah. But no, so I think it's an urban legend that addition of carbonated water was an accident. From the beginning, though, it was planned.
Yes.
It was planned from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, according to historical records, they knew or they assumed and hoped that carbonated water would add to the flavor. So that, and Pemberton didn't have carbonated water in his lab because remember, he's a pharmaceutical guy. He has a lab. And so that's why he sent it to this pharmacy and they blended it together.
Yeah.
And that's when Coca-Cola was basically born.
Yeah.
The first iteration. Yeah.
Well, I think what is also cool, and we talked about this, was like how the name.
Yes.
Like we all always say like Coca-Cola today, and you wouldn't necessarily make it a, oh wait, my stomach hurts. Let's grab a Coca-Cola. Right?
Yeah.
But technically it was actually what Pemberton's bookkeeper who came up with the name, and it was popular among many wines already, and it fit right into the pharmacy.
Yes.
Right? Because they weren't going to come up with something that, it wasn't going to be Fanta today. Like high C, you can't put that in the pharmacy. So it was Coca-Cola.
Yep.
And I thought
the two ingredients that made his drink
Coca being in the cola
and the cola from the nut. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. There you go.
I'm just saying. These are packaged in Mexico.
Yes, this is the original. Well,
they are
with the sugar, but we'll get to that. But so yes, you have Coca-Cola that's born. Again, it's based on these two items, these plant-based items, and it's important to remember this is not marketed as a beverage that you just drink.
No, not at all.
It's a medicinal drink. It's a brain tonic, is the way they advertise it.
Yep,
and they call it. That it would heal headaches, it would calm frayed nerves, it would relieve exhaustion, it would leave drinkers feeling energized and exhilarated. Sounds great.
Sounds like Red Bull today. Oh my gosh.
Pretty much. It probably was the Red Bull.
It was the Red Bull of the era.
Yeah.
I agree. But I agree now. Stuff happens.
Yeah.
Pemberton changes. He changes too. He gets sick.
Yeah.
Right. He falls ill.
Yeah. I mean, he
had financial problems.
Yeah.
The addiction took up a lot of his life, right? And I think it was how long after before he got sick he passed away.
Yeah, I mean he had been sick for a while, and he actually ends up dying from stomach cancer.
Yeah,
and like you said, he's basically bankrupt by the time he dies because he's addicted to morphine and has to keep buying morphine. He actually ends up selling the Coca-Cola brand to another pharmacist, right? Because he needs the money.
Asa Griggs,
right? And Asa Griggs can.
And how much?
Yeah,
a wafty.
Much. Yeah, I mean, 300 back then.
Oh, 300,000?
So no.
$300.
$300, and that ends up being quite a cheap price in the end of the day. So now you have Coca-Cola in the hands of a new pharmacist, Candler, and Candler starts to transform it, obviously, into a bigger brand, expands the name that is Coca-Cola.
Yep.
And eventually he ends up selling it to another
in 1916,
right?
And that was also in the museum as well. They talked about that.
And these
people
are the ones that really changed.
It was rough. If I remember correctly, it was somewhere around $25 million to the comparison. So 1960 was like $25 million.
Yeah, so Candler did pretty good for himself.
Yeah, in 1916.
Yeah. Exactly.
What's Coke? What's Coke worth today?
No, it's crazy amounts of money.
Yeah, billions of dollars.
But Candler sells it to Woodruff. Woodruff is the guy that
Robert Woodruff.
Yeah, he completely turns it into the company that we know today. But we're not going to go too much into Woodruff.
No.
I think Candler is an important piece because he's the one that really
because this is the history of fresh produce, not the history of Coca-Cola.
No, and we're going to get there. But Coca-Cola, that connection between Candler and Coca-Cola really does end up transforming Atlanta, right? Because
of course,
Candler, his brother, I believe, is the former president of what is it? The church that builds a new campus of Emory Anniversary.
Okay. Yep.
Candler then end up elected as Atlanta mayor. After he leaves Coca-Cola, he invests a lot of money into the development of
approved
Atlanta,
some of those some of those permits pretty quick.
Yeah, he got the waterworks up, he got the sewers, the hospitals. He made some personal loans to the city himself.
When we talked about Candler being a philanthropist, and a lot of these people that are here in the city, right, that started or the produce industry, like they're entrepreneurs, they're philanthropists. They want to see, like I said, that vision or something that's already passed, or sorry, not passed in them. They've already thought about it. Mm-hmm. This is what something could be versus living your everyday life and just saying this is what I have to do, right?
Right.
So that's what some of these people do, and what was it? Like you said, they gave the endowment to the university of $7 million to the Emory University. So you got to look at the infrastructure that's put in right here in Atlanta, and then you look at some of the philanthropists and entrepreneurs that are putting their own endowments and their own money on the line to make sure that the colleges build in the surrounding areas. Right, they're building the town, right, making sure it all builds.
Yeah, Atlanta completely transforms, and it's really down to Coca-Cola and Candler. Candler, who made his fortune from Coca-Cola, and then Coca-Cola, even itself as a company, steps in during the Great Depression to help
bails out the city. Yeah,
so
which we've seen, right? I mean, that's what the community is supposed to do, right?
Right.
And that success of Coca-Cola marked a turning point to the Atlanta business sector, bringing businesses here. The city became a hub of innovation. Right, so there was a lot going around. I mean, we're at the Reverb Hard Rock, or by Hard Rock, and like if you look out to the left of us, that's we see stadium, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium right here, and I always say Taylor Swift sold out that Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Just saying,
if Taylor's listening,
if Taylor's she does not want to hear the history of fresh produce, but like I said, it brought a lot of entrepreneurs, it brought a lot of people, and everybody, the Southeast is a big part of the fresh produce industry. There's a lot of product that comes out of the Southeast, but let's talk about the coca origins, and let's kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah, now I think it's now time we've
talk a little about produce.
Let's talk about produce.
Yeah,
people are thinking like,
well, I want to give you a history on Coca-Cola and how they helped shape this town. And a lot of companies wouldn't have come here if they weren't already here and seen the success.
Right.
And so you got to remember, there are big companies that are here, right? We've seen them. Georgia Pacific's here, right? You've got obviously the football teams have Weather Channel's here, right? But you got Chick-fil-A here.
Yeah.
Again, and then you've got a lot of conferences that come here. But in and out, if you look at the city, they've got a lot coming in, and they're renovating a lot of the city too. I will tell you that right now. Everywhere we go, from the houses to the buildings, a lot of stuff is boarded up, but you can tell they're renovating it, and they're making it, again, new and more lively to be around. So, but that's part of the history of this city too.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not going to stop. They're going to keep building it. They know what it was. They know what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the produce roots of this, because again, Coca-Cola is rooted in produce, believe it or not.
It is.
And so let's look at the first name of the name, right? Coca.
Yep.
So that's the first ingredient that we're going to talk about. So
which is the coca leaf.
Is the coca leaf, right? And obviously, when we hear of coca, our minds nowadays go to this. It's the source of the cocaine, which has been banned.
I would say a lot of people probably think it's like chocolate now when they say coca.
Maybe. Well,
I'm just saying.
It
depends on what demographics that people we're talking to. Maybe.
Maybe. But
my kid will be like, "That's chocolate, right?"
Not that kind of chocolate.
Not that kind of chocolate.
But Pemberton, that was an ingredient he always used, the coca leaf, to make his Coca-Cola. And now, the coca shrub is obviously not from Atlanta. It's not from the United States. This is a shrub that's indigenous to South America. So also Mexico, Indonesia, West Indies. Okay. And it's actually the oldest cultivated plant in South America, which was kind of surprising to me, considering the vast indigenous plants in that region.
South America. Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty fascinating. And the word coca actually comes from the Aymara word that means the tree, right?
That's it. Just
it's
the tree.
But I think that says a lot, that this was such a substantial, significant plant. It was the tree for these people.
Go to the tree.
Yes.
And get the leaves.
And look, we're still using the same word that the indigenous peoples called it. It's coca. And so for over 4,000 years,
that's crazy,
right? The coca has been used as a medicine, as a stimulant in these indigenous regions where it's native to. So Colombia, Peru, Bolivia. And so you even have anthropologists that have dug up, ruins and whatnot, and have found mummified humans from northern Chile, which indicated the use of coca as early as 1000 BC. So you even have evidence there. And under the Incan rule, people were using coca pretty regularly for ritual purposes, for social purposes. Armies, laborers would use it because when you chew coca, it actually alleviates hunger and thirst, which is pretty good if you're working very long or you're on the march as an army through the mountains or something like this. You would also use it for upset stomachs.
Okay.
So if you had intestinal issues, nausea, so if again high
So a lot of
elevations,
things. Yeah.
yeah, and of course there was the religious aspect of it, as we heard with the trees. There's
The
this divine plant, be found in mummies again. They'd have coca in their mouth when they were buried. So there's a lot of ritual.
He went out that guy went out with a bang.
Listen, if you're going to go to the afterlife,
When I
wanna
die, I want coca leaves under my lip. That's an ag guy right there.
exactly
Right. I want my chew in there. Okay, coca leaves for me.
Yeah,
I like these guys.
that's not a bad idea. Get buried with some your favorite produce.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, just the hearing about it and understanding. I always say like the seeing is believing aspect. You got to understand this part of history to know and where your food comes from, know where these plants come from, know where the tree comes from.
Right.
But I know that this goes into a different area. The European encounters.
Yep.
It as well.
They make their entrance.
And again, this is the 16th century. So this is around 1532. And a Spanish expedition conquered the Inca. Okay. The Spanish conquerors then attempt to eradicate, the use of coca in the native cultures.
Yep.
Okay. So, however, though, after the elimination of the coca provided unsuccessful.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going
to. They realized, the Spanish decided to exploit the cocoa growth. So there was a lot that happened with the coca becoming more widespread throughout the former Incan Empire. And then the custom of giving agricultural workers a ration of coca leaves along with their daily wage.
Yeah.
So again, now they're using it. They said exploiting it. Yeah. Now they're using it for whatever reason.
Yeah, if you can't beat it, you might
join
as well
it,
exploit
right?
it. Right?
Join it. So exactly. Up to the mid-19th century, coca growing and use had been restricted in that area, and it's in a natural habitat. The Andes mountain range of the Northwest region and South America where it's the prime regions for growing
the cocoa plant. And then, of course, eventually the Europeans do catch on to this.
Oh, no, they do.
This magical plant, right? And so finally in the 19th century, drug companies begin to explore that part of the world, trying to find, because
the pharmacists are out again.
Yeah, exactly. The pharmacists are aware that plants hold these unique properties.
Yeah.
And true, so these drug companies are scouring the planet, if you will. These Western empires are scouring the world for these plants. And so they come across, of course, the coca leaf.
Yep.
And you have this Paolo Mantegazza.
That's right.
Which is an Italian anthropologist who spends years practicing medicine in Peru. And of course, during that time, he encounters the coca. And so based on his experience with the peoples living in that area, he becomes convinced that the widespread benefits of coca, including reduction of fatigue, improvements to one's mood, and even an increase of sexual vigor.
Hey.
So, and it's amazing. During that time, it seems like...
I like how they keep telling everybody, it's not like today's days. They're like, a woman was addicted to hard drugs. They were like, back then, 100 years ago, they're like, well, he encountered it. Like,
there's always a sexual element, though, to these medicinal plants. There's sexual vigor always seems to be a side effect of these things.
Listen, our buddy Dan, the produce man, always tells me, man, some of these produce items are some real aphrodisiacs. So
they are.
People don't realize it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, the coca leaf now is one of them. We're adding it to the list, everyone.
Yeah, that to the list of, I think, celery, right? When we did Bridgerton.
That's right. It was celery too, remember? I think it's the ASMR when you
Yeah, exactly. But look, so we have the Italian anthropologist that has the coca. It makes it into British medicinal journals that are spreading it. You get even Sigmund Freud, I think we all recognize that name.
We do.
Who believes that the whole coca could be a psychological cure-all. He actually loved it so much that he thought it was a magical substance that really helped with the feelings of depression and lethargy. He even wrote actually a treatise called Uber Coca. So he was a big fan of coca. He was a big fan of coca. And of course, we heard about Vin Mariani and how it started breaking into this whole new line of coca wines.
Oh, that's right.
Very popular among the elitist and the powerful of the world. And so, coca up to this point, 19th century, it's considered safe.
It was fine.
It's considered a nerve tonic. It's considered, it's not considered to be addictive or destructive. That doesn't come. It's coming. It's not there.
Well, like I said, there was a lot of cocaine fears.
Yes.
Right. The coca plant. I mean, they were still making obviously cocaine back then. This coca plant, right?
Yeah.
They knew it was a stimulant. They knew, what it could do.
Yes.
Right. So there was a lot of cocaine fears. The U.S. Did ban cocaine in 1914.
Yep.
But even before that, the head of Coca-Cola, Asa and Chandler already had the idea to take the drug out, just because of a popular basis. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The soda was so popular, if they could figure out the ingredient, take it out, it's still going to be as popular.
Well, there was a
right?
but there was a racist undertone for why he wanted to
of
remove
course, right?
Coca.
Now, what do you want to talk? Go ahead.
Well, remember the time that we're in, right? You just said 1914, so this is early 1900s.
Yep.
Right. There's still slavery. Well,
there's
racism around, right? There's probably slavery, but not to the level, since before the Civil War. But there's still a level of abuse to
100%.
the African American population, and because a lot of these African Americans are working still very long, hard hours, a lot of them are chewing coca or drinking Coca-Cola to alleviate hunger.
Makes sense.
So now Coca-Cola and coca and cocaine is becoming associated with that part of the population. And so Coca-Cola is like, I do not want to have that association in that environment. So he says, let me be preemptive about this and take the cocaine elements out of my beverage. But he didn't want to just take the coca out completely because he was worried for two things. One, it might impact the flavor.
That's what. Yep.
And then two, if he takes coca out of his beverage,
what's the name?
And then he's afraid that the government's come after and say, you're misbranding. Right?
It's just cola.
You don't have coca in there. Why are you calling it Coca-Cola?
Coca-Cola. Yeah.
So he figures out with a range of scientists, and this becomes, one of the mystical secret ingredients.
The secret ingredients, right? To Coca-Cola.
The secret ingredients to Coca-Cola.
I saw the vault.
The vault. Lots of air quotes.
They said it was delivered there like 15 years ago.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
It's got a McDonald's hamburger in that thing.
But he does end up figuring out how to keep coca in it, but removing the cocaine. And he basically ends up using decoconized coca leaves.
Which you can do.
Which you can do. And that's how they proceed going forward. So they essentially remove the cocaine alkaloid from the leaves, and they're still able to use the leaves.
What's interesting is in the lab area of the Coca-Cola Museum, they kind of show you because you think what it goes into the formula. You just think it's water. Yeah. It's
and syrup, water and syrup.
There's sugar, right?
Yeah.
It's not they were doing a lot of you saw the periodic table, right? They had different formulas, and I think there was one thing, and there was TC plus AB equals this.
The good old
right. And you're sitting there what? Dang! If this is how they made Coca-Cola, right? Versus today, it's you're just like you said, it's like a syrup that they make, and then it makes the drink, right?
Right.
This is an actual step-by-step ingredient, and obviously now they perfected the formula.
Steps before the syrup.
Way steps before the syrup. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting when you got to the test lab.
Yep.
You actually got to see that, and citrus actually played a big part.
Yes.
Which I know we'll talk about, but
we're going to touch on briefly.
Citrus played a huge part in it, but it was interesting. And even through its importing hundreds and thousands of pounds of this stuff over the course of the 20th century.
Yeah, they still are able to do it, but
in a different, and it's legal,
right?
Fully legal.
But the question
too.
is, how do they do that?
Yeah,
because if there's a law on the books that says you can't bring in coca leaves, but somehow Coca-Cola is still able to do it. How? So you have this legislation that's passed in 1914, and there's literally a special clause just for Coca-Cola that's put in that basically says that everybody else can't bring in the coca leaf except for Coca-Cola. And actually, congressional representatives openly referred to it as the special Coca-Cola exemption. And it exists till today.
Coca-Cola importing boatloads of coca leaves.
Yeah. And so you even have companies that are writing to the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which is the precursor to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, saying, hey, we see that, these guys Coca-Cola are getting the coca leaf, and
why can't we?
We'd like to partake in that. And so the bureau basically starts dragging its feet, they don't write back to them, try to ignore them. And the reason for that was because the whole idea of giving that exemption is because they could keep eyes on one company. If you start open up to like 50 companies. Okay, now you have to have your bureau watching 50 companies, make sure they're not doing
Right.
it for the wrong reasons. So up to this day, Coca-Cola remains the only one getting the Coca.
Yeah, they were allowed to bring it in.
Yeah.
And like I said, they had boatloads of the stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And but it wasn't the illegal.
It wasn't legal.
It was
It was
decoconized.
decoconized. It was decoconized. And
What
what
do
they
you think? Decoconized? You tell us.
Yeah, I mean, basically what happens is there's a company that exists still today in New Jersey that brings in these coca leaves. It's a medical company, and they extract the cocaine because cocaine is still used in medicines today.
Correct.
For reasons. So they extract the cocaine, which goes to the medical facilities, and then Coca-Cola gets all the leftover leaves. It's a great system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But there are something called special leaves because there's not enough medical cocaine demanding in the market.
Gosh.
So they had to bring in extra coca leaves just for Coca-Cola to use.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, a lot happened through some of these things too. I mean, prohibition happened, right? I mean, that put a damper on things, and then even keep moving forward. The government, during these time periods, made the coca leaf only an exemption for medical reasons.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, Coca-Cola definitely got some exemptions, but probably again played a large part. We call it the politics today, right? Lobbying.
Yep. Oh, ton of lobbying.
making sure that they're showing up to the meetings, showing what they're doing. Because again, I mean, yeah, it takes a lot of money to do those kinds of things, right?
Well, they even did it with the United Nations.
Yeah,
so in 1961,
I know,
they did right. They did the basically the international ban on narcotics and things like this, and obviously cocaine.
I like how they said the loophole.
Yeah, the loophole. But that's what happened. They made sure to use that existing loophole that they had in the U.S. Said, hey, look, in the U.S. we had this exemption because this is the process, and they were even able to convince the UN that they can be the only one. And so far as that, and we saw this, I think, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, where the Peruvian government came in and said, hey, like you just added coca leaf and cocaine to the list of, class 1 substance abuse. This is a plant that's indigenous to our peoples. It's religiously connected to us, and we're not allowed to use it, but
companies are allowed to use it.
And that's the crazy part about this whole story. And we see this with other plants, right? Again, this comes back to produce and plants and the interpretation of how we use those things and how the West has oftentimes used it for the wrong reasons and exploited it for the wrong reasons, where it's been used for very different reasons where it wasn't being abused and exploited. But
I agree.
So this is a perfect example of Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola got so nervous and that they want to protect their coca that they actually went so far, even though they had all these exemptions. They said, we're going to take one extra step and just make sure we have a backup supply of coca. So they go to Hawaii and they actually establish, with the government's consent, this experiment to grow coca leaves in Hawaii. And they do this in the 60s.
So they can decoconize them.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is, unfortunately, there's a fungus that ends up like killing off all the plants. And so they abandoned ship.
They tried.
Coca-Cola didn't have any stake in the game because they didn't have to pay for it. The university paid for it. So they just got to walk away.
It was an experiment.
It was an experiment.
See? Jeez, a lot happens. I mean, a lot happens.
So that's the coca piece of this drink, which again still exists today. Coca-Cola is the one company that can bring a US coca leaf and use it in their beverage.
But nobody else. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, and listen, that's still all fresh.
Yeah.
Right? Produce.
Yeah.
And even let's talk about the next item.
The next
which is cola.
Cola.
But now the cola is a K-O-L-A.
Right. They did this for alliteration because it looks better.
It looks fancy.
Yeah.
Oh, so fancy. Let's talk about the cola nut. Is the fruit of the cola tree, indigenous to West Africa. The trees, which reach heights about 40 to 60 feet, produce a star-shaped fruit. Okay, John. So each fruit contains between 2 and 5 cola nuts, about the size of a chestnut. This little fruit is packed with caffeine. Yeah.
Well, we all enjoy, right?
Packed with caffeine.
Just like coffee. Just like chocolate.
But good
same
coffee.
Stuff.
We were at this diner this morning. Oh my gosh.
Let's not go down there. Right? Let's not go down there. Right?
Poor Dan was like, that guy was like, we gave the guy a hard time. It was good. It was a fun, hard time. But I was like, is your coffee good? He's like, it's good black coffee. Oh gosh. So let's talk about this. The pod of the koala nut is about 2 inches long,
That's big, yeah.
and it's green. So inside the shell are the knobs, right? The
Mhm.
fleshy meat that like you would find inside of a chestnut.
Yep.
But they're reddish.
Yes.
So this is reddish with a little bit of white in color. And in West Africa today, cola is essential to the community gatherings, but it also has a real cultural value as well and importance. So you can give cola nut as a religious offering or to show respect.
Yeah.
So another plant that has to do something with a religious nature too.
Yeah, that's integral to a person's culture and
Yep.
community and things like this.
Yep.
And in addition to obviously that, like you said, I mean, similar to the coca, the people would chew on these cola nuts and it would give them stimulants, would give them energy.
Well, and low libido. So it's like if you got a low libido, guess what?
Yeah,
you chew some of these bad boys.
Yep, it's there again.
Jesus.
And it contains again the same substances that occur naturally in tea, in coffee, and chocolate.
It's probably the same stuff they said they extract some of this and put it in the drugs today, right?
Yeah, I mean you can extract a lot of stuff from plants and use it for
you call it plant-based
intentions that shouldn't be, but
they
can do that with a lot of things. So yeah, I mean the kola nut is something that's been cultivated in West Africa, like you said, for hundreds and hundreds of years. For many years, you actually had these trees that were planted on graves as part of rituals, and though the nuts were actually needed to stay moist when they were travel, because they were again somewhat delicate to transport. There was evidence that traders carried them actually hundreds of miles throughout forests and savannas. So this nut was expanding. They used it as currency. It was actually a form of currency. So we use coins or whatever. People are using kola nuts as a form of currency. So
all right, good way to barter.
Yeah, and then in 1581, you have actually even the Songhai Empire in Western Sahel that sent to Timbuktu on the occasion of a mosque's construction. A collection of gifts of gold, cowrie shells, which are basically often used as a form of currency in Africa, and kola nuts. So again, it just indicates that value of this produce item within this culture. But again, Patrick, the Europeans enter the scene.
They're back at it. Right?
What are they? What are they up to?
Listen,
in the kola nut?
They didn't even know about it until the 1500s.
No.
So they were a little bit behind the times.
Yeah.
We're still using morphine, They were way behind. They didn't even know what was going on. When Portuguese ships arrived on the coast, which is now Sierra Leone, while the Portuguese took part in the trade, they were ferrying these nuts down the coast along with other goods. By 1620, when the English explorer Richard Jobson made his way up to Gambia, the nuts were still peculiar to his eyes. So he was already looking at them going, what are these things? And when we were the highest part of the river, people brought them abundantly up unto us and did wonder much. We made no more esteem or care to buy them, he wrote. But 10 is a present for a king. Given 6 of the nuts himself, Robson hoped to bring them back to England, but they withered or were eaten by worms before they made it even home.
Yeah.
So people really, they wanted these to get back all the way to their.
Well, you saw the value in it, right? Because he saw the kings were getting it.
I mean, it's like that, they're giving them that gold. I mean, this is gold, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they don't survive. Right.
Another fruit. Yeah. No,
but like the coca, the cola makes it to Europe. It becomes this exotic thing. That
I was
going to
say, stimulant again. Right. You talk about being an exotic stimulant, and again, we knew that from the coca leaves. It was a natural stimulant, right? Gave you energy. So, which is interesting. I mean, again, you look at the name. Did you think that about the name with Coca-Cola?
Did I realize it was
like that deep?
No, I didn't.
When you were, exactly. I didn't even realize that either.
I did not. Nope. But yeah, so I mean, the cola, you have cola chocolate, you have cola champagne. All these things are spreading through Europe because you had coca wine, but now you have these cola beverages, right?
100%.
And so obviously Pemberton noticed this when he was creating his concoction, and he says, that seems like an interesting ingredient to add to my beverage.
How dare you?
And so, but he thought specifically that cola nut had the special amount of caffeine or a special caffeine stimulant element to it. But in reality, there is nothing special about the caffeine in cola. It's just the same as tea. It's the same as chocolate.
Same old song and dance.
Right.
They just wanted to refurbish it a little bit.
Well, look, so Pemberton gets the caffeine. Things are
Yep.
great. It's in the Coca-Cola ingredients. But then 1900s hits. You have this food purity movement coming in, where the concept of pure and natural becomes increasingly related, and so people are seeing that the field and pasture are becoming romanticized.
Oh.
Food processing and industrialization comes to look like adulteration and unnatural. So Coca-Cola starts to liken its products to other agricultural products. They're like, hey, our beverage is like tea. It's a leaf-based
It's a leaf-based.
it's like hot chocolate. It's like coffee, because we have Coca and we have Cola.
Oh, they lied.
And so this is what they're trying to position their beverage in during this movement.
But that brings, I mean, they have this like caffeine fear too, kind of from the cola plant than the Coca plant.
Because they think it's this additive.
Yes.
Right.
They
don't think this is a
natural
occurring substance.
Because that would taste, maybe, I don't know. That's interesting, right? Yep. Even back then, they didn't think that this was natural.
Right. It's almost like goes up and down.
Wow.
In the cycles. So you have the Pure Food and Drug Act.
Right.
1906, right.
Yep.
And they go after Coca-Cola specifically. They say, because obviously it's one of the biggest beverages out there, and they're saying, well, you are using what we consider to be a harmful substance. Right.
That's your class 1 drug.
That's you
got coca leaves in here. Now you got caffeine.
Yeah, it's not a natural component to the beverage.
Listen, if Bobby Boucher's mom was here, she would have said that is the devil. Okay.
Right. So it actually goes to court, right?
Okay.
The US.
That was what?
What is it?
Between 1906 and 1909.
Yep.
Right.
And you have the US.
Because then they outlawed Coca-Cola, or they rose to outlaw Coca-Cola,
right,
as alleged excess of the caffeine content.
Yeah.
But we've even had issues today of products with too much caffeine content in it.
Yeah.
So the United States versus 40 barrels and 20 kegs of Coca-Cola, the trial judge found that Coca-Cola had a right to use caffeine as it saw fit. However, Coca-Cola lost when the government appealed the verdict to the U.S. Supreme Court. Eventually, the company reached a settlement with the federal government that reduced the amount of caffeine in its beverages.
Yeah. So,
they came to an understanding.
And the caffeine would go up and down over the years.
Yeah. Unless it's the Mexican one. This is weird. I don't know what they do with this one. It's packaged in
Mexico.
It says it right here on the bottle too.
Yeah. But look, so the Coca-Cola comes off pretty okay. They're allowed to keep the caffeine in the drink.
But I think it's interesting how they first do a decoconized coca leaf.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go into cola alternatives.
Well, exactly. Right, because the problem is, where's the cola nuts coming from?
That's what I'm saying. Right? That's what I'm saying. Where do the cola nuts come from?
Well, we said
Africa.
It's coming from Africa.
Okay.
Africa to the U.S., especially in that period, it's expensive.
It's
expensive today. So it's only so many cola trees. This is not like plantations of cola trees. They grow in certain regions, so they have to start looking at alternatives. Or else we're going to get the caffeine. They still want the cola for the flavor element and to protect, again, misbranding and all that stuff. So they get kind of creative, actually, because like we talked about, there's caffeine in tea, there's caffeine in coffee. And when tea was being sold and marketed during that period, tea was you did tea like the old-fashioned way with just the tea leaves. You put the tea leaves in like I don't know what the apparatuses are called.
Yeah.
Right, but you know what I'm talking about. You put in those like little like round things, and you steep it in.
It's like straining it,
And they would discard all the bad leaves. What they not cat 1 like what we have in produce today, right? If it's not good quality, it goes cat 2, it goes somewhere else.
It's not on. Yeah.
Coca-Cola did the same thing with the tea leaves. So they would take what they called the floor, the leaves on the floor of the factories, the ones that were no good.
Okay.
And they would use that for their caffeine instead. So that was a great model because it was garbage to the tea industry.
Good thing that food safety wasn't around back then.
Well, exactly. But it was a great model for them. This is garbage to them, but we can use it. Wonderful. But then a bad thing happens, right? The tea bag gets embedded.
Yep. And then they stopped using the leaves.
Right. The leaves
altogether.
The quality
and
of
that was about the 1950s.
Yes,
the tea bag becomes there, and then decaf coffee takes
that's
off in the 1950s as well.
Yep.
So helping Coca-Cola access a strong supply of caffeine
because now coffee is taken out.
They want to drink formaldehyde. But today
guess
you
so.
can make caffeine in a chemical factory now.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was before. You can kind of make that Wish version.
Well, exactly. So, but there is still a trace of Coca-Cola. Oh, sorry. Like, all these words are so illiteracy. The cola, there's still traces of cola apparently in the actual beverage. It's not used for the caffeine necessarily, but they are convinced that it still adds a little bit of flavor. So that gives you a little bit of the produce background between Coca and cola.
Yeah.
Now, what I think is also really neat is if you look at this bottle, okay? Now, this isn't the original design of this bottle.
Listen, I saw the pictures
saw
and
it.
video of the original design, and they designed this bottle actually to fit your hand in the right way.
Yes.
That's what it was for. And
Well,
I did like
the
that
design
too.
was.
The design.
What was
yeah.
the impetus?
Listen, there's only so much I could remember. Like I was chasing around a 3-year-old, hanging out with a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 14. Listen,
come on.
But if you look at the winning design, right, and we'll tell you, we'll want to let you know who it was by the Root Glass Company of Terre Haute, Indiana. Saw inspiration from 2 Coca-Cola ingredients, the coca leaf and the cola nut. So, however, the bottle's fluted contour shape was mistakenly modeled after the coca pod. Okay,
the cacao.
Oh, cacao pod. Then the main ingredient in chocolate.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the Coca-Cola company adopted the Root Glass Company's bottle design in 1916, but the original prototype was never manufactured because it was too top heavy and unstable.
Yeah.
The first commercial Coke bottles debuted with a wider base and slimmed down, contoured shape.
You essentially see somewhat today. So you have the contours here, and if you look at a cacao nut, it's very similar.
Yeah.
It has those ribs and
it's supposed to, the older bottles, like I said, the original, like those green looking ones.
Yes.
They did it so it perfectly would fit your hand.
Yeah, it was thicker on the top.
Yeah. And then obviously
it looked much more like a coconut.
And it wouldn't slip out of your hands.
But the reason why they did that too is because it was so popular to drink. People are creating
I love that bottle.
And so they said we need to have our own bottle design.
Yeah.
And that's what made this bottle
design.
I mean,
when you see those bottles in the store, we always want to buy one of those just because we know.
Yeah. So again, even the bottle is based off of.
It's bottled in Mexico.
It's even based off of fresh produce. The design.
Yeah, it is. I mean, people, you might not have noticed that.
Yes.
So the next is one of my favorites, though.
Yeah, we're gonna round it off with.
We're almost done. Listen,
we can't have an episode without citrus in it.
We cannot. We're getting countdowns in the back from this guy over here.
Our
in the
producer
corner.
is
listen.
us to speed up.
We got to give shout out to our buddy. Jehoon. He's always behind the scenes here.
Yes.
And you listen, everybody. Where's your hat, Jehoon? Are you wearing your hat? Let's make sure your hat's on. Listen, shout out to our buddy Brian over in Boston. That loves G's hat, Brian McGuire.
I know it.
His tourist hat.
That's right.
Listen, we got him a new one. Listen, we got him one from IKEA. IKEA has one of those.
Yeah?
And I told him, I said, G, it's waterproof.
Oh.
And he was like, okay. She looks at me strange once in a while, but we're getting some time counts over there. We're going to start wrapping this up and talk about citrus and sugar, though, because Coca-Cola and other U.S. soft drink manufacturers switched from cane sugar to the high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, in the 1980s because why?
Corn subsidies.
Cheaper ingredients. It happens again. Yeah. So corn subsidies, the U.S. government subsidized corn production, making it cheaper to grow and use as a sweetener.
Yeah.
So now what happens? Import tariffs on imported sugar made it more expensive. Domestic sugar quotas on domestic sugar production limited to the amount they could have available. So there's a lot going on. Coca-Cola is one of the nation's largest orange juice distributors as well.
Yes, I didn't know that.
I believe Simply Orange is under their battalion.
Right, because that's the Minute Maid.
They got a lot. Yeah. So we were talking about that at breakfast this morning, trying to figure out who owned who. But I have a picture.
Well, Tropicana is Pepsi.
Yeah, Tropicana is Pepsi. We know that. Yeah. And it's still Pepsi.
It is.
Yeah, it's so hard to know sometimes. But there's a lot of brands that you didn't even know was owned by Coca-Cola, and they had like a bottle wall that kind of showed all their bottles, cans, everything. So the Minute Maid Company was purchased by Coca-Cola in 1960. In 1970, It was the single largest citrus producer in the States with an average of 30,000 acres of orange groves and nearly 3,000 employees. The company was involved in a scandal in the U.S. about bad housing, often referred to as slave quarters and working conditions to Minute Maid from laborers in Florida. And the United Farm Workers stepped in to support those workers.
Our favorite group steps back into
they
our
stepped
episode
back
here.
in. They were part of our Delano grape Cesar Chavez movement as well. Yeah. So conditions improved somewhat after Minute Maid signed a contract with the United Farm Workers in 1972. And the Coca-Cola company sold to Minute Maid orange groves in Florida in the 1990s, ending its contractual relationships with the UFW.
Yeah.
How dare them?
They obviously did that because they didn't want the headache. Because that's not part of Coca-Cola's model. I know we haven't talked about it, but we're not the history of politics and business.
No, there's enough politics going on.
Coca-Cola's
there's a sign right outside of our window over to the left of you. I had to look at this whole time.
Well, you know. But Coca-Cola's model was always successful because they didn't own anything. They didn't own the bottle.
No, they didn't own it at all. Anything.
So when they got into the orange groves and they started having to deal with actual orange groves, the farmers, all these things, that was just a whole new
they didn't know what was going on.
No. So they sold the groves, like you said, but it's still under Coca-Cola's ownership, the Minute Maid brand.
Right.
It's not managed by them. They don't own the physical groves. It's contracted. So they sold, I think, to a bunch of big
other multinational
agribusinesses out there. But I think the agreement is that they have to sell their whole crop to Coca-Cola for the Minute Maid. So Coca-Cola still basically gets their cake and gets eaten too.
Well, it was a fun dive into Coca-Cola.
See, who would have guessed?
But again, that's what the history of fresh produce is about, everyone. Like, we talk about this all the time. And what do I say? It's like, you got to know where we came from to know where we're going, right? We don't want to repeat history because that happens a lot.
Although we do, we do. More than
but we get to see how food shapes our history. I mean, everything about our history has to do with food. And when we first started this series, we did say to ourselves, we go, man, this is going to be hard because a lot of like civilizations that are lost to crops, right?
Yeah.
We talk about slavery. We talk about things that are like, whoa, this happened because of food.
Yeah.
Right. Because without certain things, our crops wouldn't have been picked back then. Right. And then if you look at it, I always say this today, like, who is the majority of actually farm workers in America? It's Hispanics.
Yeah.
Right. So it's crazy that how we see, and Cesar Chavez was part of that with that Delano grape strikes and all those things. But look at how it has shaped industries. It shaped communities. Heck, Delano is majority in Delano, California, right?
Yeah.
It's Hispanic farm workers, right? That work for like the Wonderful Group and people like that, great companies, right?
Yeah.
And all the other citrus companies out there, or they're going into Idaho, like Shay Myers was saying, and he hires the H2A workers.
Right.
So, food and even the produce, the crops, it has shaped us so much because without all of those instances, what would I would say the cultivation of, widespread actually going commercial, right, John? We talked about that in a lot of our episodes, and it's crazy to understand how it all comes together.
Yeah. Produce. I mean, if for those of the listeners here who have been following our episodes for the last, I guess, about almost 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just evidence, produce and crops have always been part of history.
Yes.
They might not have always been the forefront of the focus.
Exchanges to kings.
Right. But we're here to shine that light and that spotlight. And it's fascinating to see, like you say, not only how it impacted those moments in history, but how it shaped the world we are today. And literally the city that we are today. Because of Coca-Cola, which is based primarily on these two ingredients that they want to market, which are
let's thank our sponsor for this. The International Fresh Produce Association. We call it IFPA. Some people call it IFPA. Thanks for the sponsorship. Hooking us up with the Reverb radio station here by Hard Rock. And our goal is just to get out the word of history of fresh produce. If you're at the show, we're going to be all over the show. John, you're going to be at your booth. Throughout the day, Friday and Saturday, we're going to be there as well, but we're going to be walking around. We're going to be checking out a lot of our sponsors' booths, and we're also going to have some new people on the podcast, some students.
Yes,
so
we will
stay tuned for that.
From our other sponsor,
from one of our other sponsor.
that'll be fun.
We're mixing it up a little bit. We're trying to get more people involved, and Cornell as a sponsor was really good to get involved. They're part of the IFPA's leadership program as well.
That's right, the executive leadership program.
You've spoken at that, right?
Yes.
And we like having them involved because then it gets students involved, and we can help shape people's futures as well.
Exactly.
So I love that. And HFP Club, throw it out there.
Yes. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed what you heard today and you've never heard of History of Fresh Produce, we have ways that you can experience it to a whole new level, right?
Yeah.
The History of Fresh Produce Club, we have bonus episodes, you get early releases, exclusive discounts on books that we mentioned through many of our episodes, and much more. I can never remember all of it, but check it out. It's always in our show notes, a link to the show, to the club. So be part of the community.
Please. And everyone, next time you're drinking a Coca-Cola, just know.
Yeah, think produce.
Think produce. And you've got a cola/coconut in your hand.
That's right.
All right. Well, it's goodbye for me, Patrick Kelly.
Goodbye for me, John Papp.